Let's go ahead and talk about it. Number one. Anyone? What's the correct answer for number one? Anyone? Anyone? 2%? I can tell you right now, 2% is too high. Okay? The correct answer is really D. Okay? And the key word in that item is adjudication. Okay? Adjudicated cases. And what adjudication means is that, the case that we're referring to in this question has gone through the entire investigative process of the Florida Department of Education, all the way to the Education Practices Commission. Okay? And the other reason why also it's 0.2% is that, usually when you hear of educators' misconduct in a community, where do you see it on the newspaper? The front page, right? And then nowadays, the cable news, MSNBC, Fox, they carry all these things. If you guys remember, just about a period of about 6-7 months ago, in the Tampa Bay area, if you guys listen to the news, in the Tampa Bay area, there were, or maybe even 7 months ago, there were 3 female teachers, one after the other. I mean, this was within a week difference. They had real relationship, and you understand what I mean by real relationship, with their minor male students. These are all female students, female teachers. That's statutory rape. Okay? And so one of my colleagues in Virginia called me and said, Niji, what's going on in Florida? I said, I have no idea. Don't ask me. So, that's why usually people think it's much bigger than it really is. Okay? Okay, number 2. What's the correct answer for number 2? Tracy, you already said it. It's after, they're no longer within the school system. Okay, number 3. Number 3, you're correct. What's your name, please?
Debbie.
Debbie. Number 3, and let me just quickly explain this, is one of your rights as teachers of record, okay? And you can find this section right here, and I'll just quickly describe it, and it's in this section of your, the Florida statutes that I gave you. But this section, if you really want to find where it is in Florida law, it's in 1012.34, parent 3, parent D of the Florida statutes, okay? 1012.34, parent 3, parent D. And so what this section basically says is that this is one of your rights. It says that if you are not performing your job satisfactorily, okay, the school district can't just come and say, we want to fire you, you need to get out of here. There's a process that they need to follow. And so this section of the Florida statute is saying that whoever is responsible for conducting your evaluation, which is the principal, then that principal is supposed to send you some type of notification. N for notification, okay? And so within that notification, they have to explain. E for notification. E for explanation. Okay? They have to explain to you in that letter, which we are referring to as notification, what are the deficiencies. They have to explain what it is. Okay? And then they have to provide for you some type of assistance. A for assistance. Okay? And then T, they have to give you ample time to correct the deficiencies. And so what I'm describing to you is what is referred to as the NEAT process. N-E-A-T. N-E-A-T. Okay? And so time, as defined in this section of Florida law, is 90 calendar days for you to correct the deficiencies. Okay? And 90 calendar days doesn't include school vacation, school holidays. Okay? So in the need process, if you're performing your evaluation and you're not doing well, you're not doing what you're supposed to do, you're not performing your job satisfactorily, they have to send you notification. And they have to explain in that notification the deficiencies that we're talking about. And they have to give you some type of assistance. And then they have to give you time to correct the deficiencies. And time is 90 calendar days. Okay. Okay, let's move on to number 4. Number 4 is true. Okay. Number 5. It's actually B, use of excessive force. Okay? Number 6. I need someone to tell me the correct answer on number 6. Anyone? No standard of proof at all? Did you say C? What's your name?
Brad.
Brad? Brad is correct. Why did you say C? Was that just a guess?
No, it wasn't a guess. I said C because administrative is like the school board.
Okay, okay.
It's not really a criminal thing.
And it's not civil.
The school board's taking the certificate.
Okay, it kind of makes sense right there, but let me explain it to you, okay? Now, Brad is right that the process, the standard of proof, that's what that means. The standard of proof that the Florida Department of Education uses is not criminal. Because criminal uses a higher standard, okay? Because when you look at criminal cases, we're talking about very egregious situations, murder, and the list goes on. And civil, kind of petty stuff, misdemeanor, And so that's good reasoning right there, It's administrative, okay? Now, the Florida Department of Education calls it administrative, clear, C-L-E-A-R, and convincing evidence. I'll say it again. Administrative, clear, and convincing evidence. Okay? Now, on a different test item, instead of calling it administrative, they would just say clear and convincing evidence. Okay? Now, let's kind of compare that standard that is used by the Department of Education, which is administrative, clear, and convincing evidence, to the criminal and also to the civil. The standard of proof that is used in a criminal court, because that situation is so egregious, is what is referred to, the standard of proof that they use is what is referred to beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay? When you try to quantify that, it's 99.9%. The judge, the jury must really feel you are telling the whole truth. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. We cannot even begin to doubt whether you are telling us the lie anymore. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. You are telling the truth. And so it's 99.9%. Okay? And so that standard is very high. The civil, the standard that is used is the preponderance of the evidence. Just barely convince us we'll be okay. Because the nature of those cases are misdemeanors, petty theft. Okay? That's roughly about 55%. Okay? Now, the standard of proof that is used by the Department of Education, which is administrative, clear, and convincing evidence, is right in the middle. It is not as stringent or as high as the standard of proof that is used in a criminal court. And it is still not as low as the standard of proof that is used in a civil court. So that administrative standard of proof is about roughly 65-75%. It's right in the middle, okay? Not as high as standard that is used in a criminal court, and not as low as the standard of proof that is used in a civil court. Okay, very good. Let's move on to number 7. Number 7 is really supposed to confuse you, but it is C. It's after that student is no longer, again, Tracy, after that student is no longer within the K-12 system. Okay? I remember on this specific question, it was on another question. One of the students said, the correct answer should be after the student has turned 18. I said, what if they're still within the K-12 system? So I was kidding with him. I said, when you become a teacher of record and you want to go date an 18-year-old student, you go ahead. You know, and the whole class just erupted. Okay, let's move on here. Number 8. Number 8 is A. And let me just quickly bring up this point. If you look at number 8, you read it very carefully. It's talking about private issues, right? And so that again reminds us that Florida is a non-nexus state. And we need to remember that from henceforth. Florida is different from most other states. What you do in the privacy of your home, and the reason why I'm emphasizing this nexus thing is because usually we find out that students who are not married, oh, this cannot affect me, you know, I'm not married, you know. But you go visit your boyfriend, and you guys start fighting, the neighbors can call the police. And when the law enforcement agency comes, you better believe it, they are going to arrest someone. And when they arrest you, the bottom line is, whether they are telling the truth or not, that remains on your record forever. And so that's why we've got to be very careful here. Okay, number...
That's why so many,
Debbie? Yeah.
I think that's why so many teachers are doing stupid things, is because they don't get the fact that private life isn't private anymore.
Well, that's an excellent point. What happens is that, you know, you are right. A lot of educators, some of them don't even know that there is a code and the principles that govern their both professional and personal lives. And so, in fact, that's one of the reasons that we developed when I was in the Florida Department of Education. I used to work for the Florida Department of Education for 15 years before I came to St. Petersburg College in 2003. And we developed the ethics training became effective in 1992. And at that time, that was when we found out that educators who have been in the profession for 30 years had no clue. There was a code and principles that govern not only their professional life, but also their private lives. And you're right, a lot of educators get into trouble. A lot of colleges of education don't get the kind of training that you are getting right now, okay? And that's just the fact. And so that's one of the reasons. And again, there are some educators that their arrogance gets in the way. You know, I remember when I was in DOE, we used to take this training to K-12 schools, even colleges of education. And even when we go to K-12 schools, teachers who have been in the education profession for 25 years, 30 years will tell me right to my face in the training, oh, Dr. Odutola, I don't need you to be telling me this. I don't need any of this. I said, okay, thank you. But I'm going to continue with the training because that's what I was here to ask to come here to do. You know. So you had a question.
I was going to ask, like, what's the percentage of states that are nexus and non-nexus?
I mean, I don't know how many states, but
like
I can tell you.
The majority is nexus states?
Actually, I think Florida really stands out. I cannot give you a percentage of number of states who are nexus and non-nexus. You know, I just know a couple of states that are nexus, you know, and Florida is not a nexus state.
And I have one more question.
Yes.
So if you were to be like sanctioned, or so they took away your license like in a non-nexus state, would you be able to go to a nexus state? Would they consider that when hiring?
Most likely not. Okay, and I'm going to explain all of that as part of the investigative process. Because what happens is that there is a national database, okay, that is called NASTEC database, that all states, they subscribe to this national database. And what they do is that any state certification issue, you know, if an educator certificate has been sanctioned, they post that information in that NASTEC national database. So if someone were coming from Georgia to the state of Florida, the Florida Department of Education is going to want to find out, well, what happened to your certificate when you were in Georgia? And so they go to the NASTEC national database, and it will tell them if this educator certificate has been relinquished, has been surrendered, has been permanently revoked, you know, so that is what happened. And if it has been relinquished or permanently revoked, most states will not issue a new certificate. for that educator? Very good question. And we will cover it more, when we move on, okay? Number 8, or number 9, excuse me, all of the above. And number 10, okay, B, and at B, we're going to come to the principles of professional conduct because this is very critical. This is where it requires you, it says that, if you have been arrested, okay, or charged with the abuse of a minor child's sale or possession of controlled substance, okay, it doesn't stop right there. If you have been arrested for DUI or for something else, you're supposed to self-report yourself within 48 hours to an appropriate authority. But when we get to this section of the principles of professional conduct, we are going to go more into depth with it in terms of what that really means for you. Okay? Ali, you had a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you before you started going on.
Go ahead.
Curious, do you know if Louisiana is a nexus state?
I'm not sure, but I can check for you.
Just because I was thinking about, like, it's legal for kids that are, I think, under the age of 18 or is it over 16, something like under 21, to drink with their parents at their home. It's legal in Louisiana.
Okay.
And but it's not really legal. So you think, like, what if they were drinking at a home of a teacher? You know what I mean? You start getting on those fine lines.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I'll check it out, because that's an excellent point. If indeed that is something that the state of Louisiana allows, did you say 17, 18, or even young?
I think it's older than 16, but it's under 21.
Under 21 to drink with their parents. Yeah, I'll check and see whether it's a nexus state, or not. Okay, let's move on here. Okay, this is where, if you have any burning questions dealing with ethics, we can talk about it now, or if you don't have any right now, we can just continue going, and then anytime you have a question, just raise up your hand, and we'll talk about it at that point. Okay? So let's just move on going, and then when you have any questions, just raise up your hand. Okay? Now, this is where we're going to talk about 3 agencies within the Florida Department of Education that deal directly with the code and the principles of professional conduct and other sections of Florida law. Okay? The first one that we're going to talk about is the Education Standards Commission. Okay? The Education Standards Commission has 24 members. Okay? And the Education Standards Commission, when I was in the DOE, this is the commission that I actually really worked for. The commission used to meet about 7, 8 times, 9 times in a year. And we go to different parts of the state. We go to Miami, Pensacola, Jacksonville, Central Florida, and we hold our meetings at several points. Now, the Education Standards Commission is now an ad hoc commission. They don't meet on a regular basis anymore. They're only invited in, when they are invited to come in by the Commission of Education. Okay? So what is the responsibility of the Education Standards Commission? The Education Standards Commission conducts research, okay, and develops standards for the education profession. Okay? They develop research, or they conduct research, and they develop standards for the education profession. Okay? What are some of the standards that we're talking about? The Education Standards Commission is the commission that developed the educator accomplished practices. Okay? This is also the commission that developed the principles of professional conduct. Okay? This is also the commission, which the Education Practices Commission, that developed the standards for the use of reasonable force. Okay? So that is the Education Standards Commission. Okay? The next commission that we're going to talk about is the Education Practices Commission. This is the commission you need to be afraid of, because this is the commission that has the authority to sanction your certificate. Okay? The Education Practices Commission, the EPC. It has 25 members. Okay? It actually used to have 17 members, but as a result of Senate Bill 1712, its membership was increased to 25, and that became effective in 2008, July 1 of 2008. Okay? The first responsibility of the EPC is to interpret and apply the standards developed by the Education Standards Commission. Okay? The real responsibility of the Education Practices Commission is to come up with disciplinary actions against an educator's certificate. Another way to say it is that they come up with final orders against an educator's certificate. Okay? This is the commission that can punish your certificate, that can sanction your certificate. Okay? And so you need to be very careful of the different ways that it can be described. Usually, technical term is that the Education Standards Commission come up with final orders. Okay? In another test item, someone could say final disciplinary orders or final disciplinary actions. The bottom line is that this is the commission that can take action against your certificate. It can sanction your certificate. It can come up with disciplinary actions against your certificate, or it can come up with final orders against your certificate. So are you with me on the Education Practices Commission? Okay. Now, the Professional Practices Services. The Professional Practices Services, when people report an educator to the Florida Department of Education, this is who they refer the case to, the Professional Practices Services, okay? And the primary responsibility of the Professional Practices Services is to investigate allegations of a violation that has been reported to them, okay? The primary responsibility of the PPS is to investigate allegations of a violation of the principles of professional conduct or any other sections of Florida law. Okay? Are you with me? Okay? Now, before the PPS can conduct an investigation, they need to do two things. Number one, when a case comes before them, number one, they have to determine, do they have jurisdiction to conduct an investigation? So for example, if a school district were to report an intern, they say, well, we don't have any jurisdiction over a teacher candidate. And so that is why for teacher candidates, they will put that information in the database and just wait until the DOE has jurisdiction. And so what is jurisdiction? Jurisdiction only means two things. Number one, it's either you currently hold a state certificate, or you have applied for a state certificate. Okay? So at that point, the Department of Education can say, no, we don't want to give you a certificate. You know, they can take action, whether you hold a state certificate or you have applied for one. Okay? The other thing that they have to do is that before they conduct an investigation, they have to make sure that you have you have violated either specific sections of State Board of Education rule or specific sections of Florida law. And that is what they refer to as determining legal sufficiency for them to conduct an investigation. They have to make sure that they have the legal ground to conduct an investigation, because if they didn't do that, then you have a lot of educators who will be filing legal recourse against the Department of Education. So they want to be sure truly before they conduct an investigation that you as a teacher of record, you've either violated a section of the State Board of Education rule, and this is what we are referring to as the State Board of Education rule, or a section of Florida law. And that's what they mean by determining legal sufficiency. Okay. So, what usually happens on some test items, they try to confuse you between the Professional Practices Services and the Education Practices Commission. Okay? So hear me out. For example, you get a test item that basically says the primary responsibility of the Education Practices Commission is to conduct an investigation on the allegation of a violation of the principles of professional conduct or other sections of Florida law. True or false?
False.
Very good. Okay? Or if it's coined the other way, the responsibility of the Professional Practices Services is to identify final orders on an educator's certificate. True or false?
False.
Fantastic. You get it. Okay. So let's move on here. Okay, what we're going to do right now is I'm going to wait until around 10:30 for you guys to take a break. Is that good enough? Okay. So what we're going to do at this point, we're going to talk about the Code of Ethics and also the principles of professional conduct. Okay? And we're going to talk about the Code of Ethics first. The Code of Ethics is in the State Board of Education rule, and it's in section 6B1.001, Florida Administrative Code. Now, there are 3 different sections in the Code of Ethics. The first section basically talks about what you as an educator value. And it tells you that you as an educator, you value the worth and the dignity of every person, the pursuit of truth, the devotion to excellence, the acquisition of knowledge, and the nurture of a democratic citizenship. It is on the very back of your brochure. Okay? Now we're talking about this very first section of the Code of Ethics. Now, someone will say, well, I don't understand what this means. Now, how many of you are in exceptional student education? Okay? Those of you who are in exceptional student education, you can relate to this very first one. You know, irregardless of the handicapping condition of that student, you try to give every single student in that class, regardless of how handicapping they may be, you give them the same level of worth and the same level of dignity. Okay? Now, I can also drive this home. My wife and I, we have our second child, Shola. She's 21 years old. But when she was 6 years old, she contracted a virus from preschool. It went straight into her spinal fluid. And most of you would know about spinal fluid. That's the only thing that touches the brain. Okay? And so severe brain damage. You know, she couldn't even do things that she used to do when she was 6 months. She doesn't talk, she coos, she doesn't do anything for herself. But I mean, when she cracks a smile for you, she looks like an angel, you know. But the key here is that my wife and I, we always go out of our way to make sure that we give the same level of worth and dignity to all of our children. Our oldest is 25 years, Shola is in the middle, and then I have Bumi, who is going to be 13 in July, who thinks she's 21 years old. Yeah. So, you know, but this is straightforward. This is just telling us that we treat all of our students the same level, okay? Pursuit of truth. When we get to the principles of professional conduct, there is a section under parent 5, parent A, that requires you, it legally requires you to tell the truth in all your professional dealings. When we get to that point, we'll talk about it. Devotion to excellence. Excellence about yourself, excellence about your students, okay? Acquisition of knowledge. By the time you finish from here, you get your degree, you already know your stuff. You know, But what this is also talking about is the continuum of professional development. You are constantly improving yourself. You just don't feel satisfied because you have a baccalaureate degree. You want to go for your master's. You want to go for your PhD. You want to constantly improve yourself. Okay? That's what that is talking about. Let's go to the second section of the Code of Ethics. The second section of the Code of Ethics just drives it home. Your primary responsibility as an educator is for that student and also for the development of that student's potential. That's what that is telling us, okay? And then the third section, again, just emphasizes the fact that, educators in the state of Florida must try to shoot for that highest degree of ethical conduct, okay? So again, if you look at the Code of Ethics, the Code of Ethics was actually adapted from NEA, National Education Association's Code of Ethics. And this has been in the state of Florida. The adoption was around 1965 in the state of Florida. Okay? So, at this point, let's talk about the principles of professional conduct. The principles of professional conduct were developed by the Education Standards Commission. Okay? And this is really where the rubber meets the road. And we'll talk about it. Now, there are 5 different sections of the principles of professional conduct. Okay? Section 1 just basically tells us that these principles are the disciplinary rules for educators in the state of Florida. That's what that first section tells us. Okay? Now, Section 2 reminds us that if anyone were to violate the principles that are listed in this very little brochure, it seems so insignificant. Parent 2 is telling us that these principles have the force of law. And so what this is telling us is that you violate them, you could jeopardize your certificate to revocation or suspension, or any other penalties in Florida law, in Florida statutes. Okay? Now, what I want to do at this point is go through, the third section is dealing with your obligation as an educator to your students. And then parent 3, parent A. If you read parent 3, parent A, it's basically telling us that it's your responsibility to make reasonable effort to make sure that you protect the students from conditions that may be harmful to their learning, to their mental well-being, to their physical well-being, or to their safety. Okay? So what this is telling us is that your primary responsibility is not only to provide solid quality education to the students. You see John Doe come in. John Doe is always very vibrant, singing, coming in. He's moping as he was coming in. We want to find out what's going on this morning. Are you okay? What's going on? Mental, emotional well-being of your students. Or John Doe is coming in, he's limping, or you see marks all over him. Physical health. Has John been abused at home or by somewhere else? What's going on with John? With John Doe. So this section right here is telling us that we need to be aware of the emotional well-being, the physical well-being, the psychological well-being of our students. Now, question to the class. Did Miss Jones violate parent 3, parent A? Did she? Do you remember the case, Miss Jones? Did she violate parent 3, parent A? Yeah. She did. Because John could have just totally fell in love with her. John's emotional well-being, just a total mess. Fell in love with, is it also possible that John could have contracted something from Miss Jones? Physical health. So this is how, the professional practices services, the PPS, this is how they look at every single principle and determine has it been violated or not. Okay? Let's go down to parent 3, parent E. shall not intentionally expose the student to unnecessary embarrassment or disparagement. We have a group of teachers or just some teacher who will pick on one student or a group of students for no apparent reason. The people who came up with this language are seasoned educators. They've been in education for 30, 40 years. They know what they're talking about. Okay? Let's move on. Under parent 3, parent G. What I really want to bring to your attention here is that it tells you as an educator you cannot harass or discriminate against students. And the list goes on. But what I really want to emphasize is sexual orientation. Okay? There are still some teachers out there who think that because John comes in and shaking his hips, you know, some other little kids in elementary school would just totally assume that John is a gay. John in elementary school, 6 years old, 7 years old, has no clue what he is. You know? And so what this is telling us is that it is our responsibility. You can't just sit there and let another kid pick on another kid because they think the kid is a gay. It's your responsibility to protect all of them. Okay? Okay, very good. Let's move on. Under parent 3, parent H, Miss Jones again. She violated parent 3, parent H. Okay? Because she exploited the relationship with John. Okay? Under parent 3, parent H. Parent H, I want you to wrap your head around this. It is very critical. It's very important for you to understand that. This is dealing with confidential issues. Okay? And this section is telling us that there are only 2 reasons for which you can disclose a student's confidential information. 2 reasons. The first reason, it has to be for professional reasons. And the second is that, or it has to be required by law, by Florida law. Okay? It must be for either for professional reasons or it's required by law. Okay? So what we're talking about here is that this is usually violated by rural, small school districts where grandparents come in, they want to find out, Debbie, how John Doe is performing on his FCAT. And they say, oh, come on in, come on in. And they show them John's test results on other tests that he has taken, including FCAT. That's confidential information. If they are not the biological parents or the legal guardian, you're not supposed to share that kind of information with anyone who is not a biological parent or a legal guardian, whether they are grandparents or not. Okay? And so to even take this to another level, if 2 parents have divorced and one of them went to go marry someone else, unless if the biological parent has given the new parent some type of notification that he or she can access or look at confidential information about his child, you know, then that new parent couldn't go do that. Or if the new parent has adopted, the children in question. In fact, what some school districts now do is that they've identified, they've developed a form that they will basically ask, people who are not biological or legal guardian. They will ask the biological or legal guardian to make sure they sign in and identify the name of this individual just to protect themselves. Question?
They even have a step parent section now. They used to not have that, like when I was in school, but now there's a step parent section.
Okay.
You can fill out their information and
Okay, very good.
stuff like that.
Okay, that's for some school district, that is part of that form that I'm talking about. But not every single school district has that form. So in places where the school district does not have that kind of school board policy, all the parent has to do is just write a formal letter and just say, I will appreciate if, my new wife, is given access to ABCD and can come in to pick up my child, And all they will do is make sure they put it in that child's. It's a way to protect the school. and the school board. Yes?
What if you have a divorced set of parents, say the father remarries and the new wife comes into the picture, but the mother doesn't want the new wife to have any information? What's the
Well,
boundary?
that's a totally new story. I'm not going to get in the middle of that.
That's
But-
not a family.
Well, it's a family thing, but if one of the parents says it is okay, and the biological parent, and they give that, new parent some type of documentation that the school can put in their file to say, hey, they are covered. Whether those two parents continue to fight,
I
that's
actually
not.
saw that last semester in a first grade classroom.
Yeah.
It got very,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay, that's a good choice of word. Complicated. Good. Okay, let's move on here. So the point here is that confidential information is not supposed to be shared by anybody else, except for biological or legal guide. Legal guardian. And so the other point that I want to emphasize here is that when we talk about professional purpose, what are we really talking about? Okay. Let's say that Debbie here has a student in her class. She's in first grade. And, she's developed, IEP, some strategies that have worked very well for that student. She's identified some of the issues that are very critical to the parents, because IEP can be very controversial. And the student is moving to grade 2, Alicia, right? Okay, where Alicia is the teacher. And so the two of you can get together. You can say to Alicia, look, these are the strategies that have worked very successfully for John Doe. The parents are very happy about this. These are the issues that just totally drive the parents crazy, particularly the mother. You need to make sure that you're cognizant of that. That is for professional purpose. Okay? So that is what that language is. Okay? So be very careful. You could get this question in a variety of ways. Okay, confidential information, the question could be, there are only two reasons for which, confidential information can be disclosed. What are they? And they will give you for professional purpose or required by law. And they'll come up with some other variables. Okay? It could be a true and false. Okay? Okay, let's move on here. Okay, under section 4, which is your obligation to the public. Okay? Look again at parent 4, parent C. Ms. Jones also violated that because she used her institutional privilege as the teacher of record. Okay? And so what this is also talking about is, we have some educators, they go use, school property, phones, Xerox machine for their personal business. That's also what that is talking about.